The decisions we make shape our lives, and the life you're living right now is a result of all those choices you made in the past. And this is why decision making is one of the most important meta skills you can learn to radically improve your life. Now, think about the state of your life, your career, your business, your major relationships, like anything consequential to you. How many important decisions have you had to make in your life already? And with the benefit of hindsight, how well did you make those decisions? Like, I can certainly say for myself, I've made a lot of bad decisions in my life, like continuing down the path to become a lawyer many months after realising my heart wasn't quite in it, and that time where I spent 6 months not exercising because I thought making money was more important than my health. And there are 3 broad reasons why I think we often fail to make effective decisions. So the first reason is that we are unintentionally stupid. Now, I like to think that I'm always rational and I always make the best decisions, but that's very rarely the case. There are so many different situations where we're like more prone to stupidity than we like to think. For example, when we're tired, when we're overly focused on a goal, when we're distracted, when we're rushed, when we're under the pressure of a group and things like that. Secondly, we like to look good instead of do good. It's far easier for us to signal being virtuous than actually be virtuous. This means we unconsciously make decisions based on optics, politics and defendability to avoid the criticism of others. In fact, we'd much rather like feel good about ourselves first and then have the outcome we desire second. Finally, we use the wrong mental models. Like, the quality of our mental models defines the quality of our thinking. So we need to make sure we're constantly updating and improving these mental models to ensure we make the best decision regardless of the environment we're in. Now, of course, not all decisions matter. Like, when the stakes are low, we can and should be making quick decisions, like when we're deciding what shirt to wear or what sandwich to eat. It really doesn't matter, the decision should be made quickly. But some decisions are critical. They completely change our lives, like who to trust, where to live, who to marry. Like, these decisions reverberate for years and years and years. So I want to share with you in this video the 4 key components of effective decision making. Step 1 is to define the problem. Now, this sounds stupidly obvious, but so many of us waste so much time trying to solve the wrong problem when making decisions. The main reason for this, I think, is because it's far easier for us to treat the symptoms rather than the underlying disease, or to put it another way, to put out fires rather than prevent them. For example, if we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, our immediate response might be to pull out our phone and start scrolling on social media or to watch TV. But if we really dug into the problem, we'd probably realise that actually stress isn't the thing that's causing us a concern. It's actually the fact that we've overcommitted to various different things, we've got poor time management, and we're stuck in a job that we absolutely hate. And so finding better or different ways to relax isn't actually going to help us deal with the underlying issue. From all of this, we can identify 2 key principles to keep in mind. The first is the definition principle, so we must take responsibility for defining the problem. And the second principle is the root cause principle, so we must work to understand and identify what is actually causing the problem in front of us. Actually, one really handy tool here for helping us to identify the root cause of a problem is to ask the question, what would have to be true for this problem not to exist in the first place? For example, take dog shelters. They typically struggle to get people to adopt their dogs. And so this may lead to them asking the question, how can we get more people to adopt? But the issue with that type of question is that it doesn't make any progress towards a long-term solution. So Lori Weiss, who's the founder of Downtown Dog Rescue in LA, asked a very similar question. She asked, what would have to be true for there to be fewer dogs to adopt in the first place? And she found that 30% of the dogs ending up in the shelter were surrenders, basically dogs that had to be given up because the owner could no longer afford to look after them. And so she came up with this new plan where she got staff to ask the various owners whether or not they want to keep the dog, and the shelter would provide them with the necessary support. And so from this, not only was that a cheaper thing for the shelter to do, like it was cheaper for them to give money to the owner rather than taking the dog into the shelter, but it also enabled 75% of dog owners to keep their dog rather than surrendering it. Once we're clear on the problem, we now need to think of all the possible solutions. And one of the most common mistakes we typically make at this stage of the decision-making process is to resort to something known as magical thinking. Basically, we put our head in the ground and hope the problem just disappears, or we hope some kind of magical solution is going to present itself to us. And you know what, I get it, like having to deal with the fact that we're overweight or in a bad relationship or still living in our parents' basement is like super uncomfortable, but we have to face up to the reality. And this leads me on to 2 further principles, the bad outcomes principle and the second level thinking principle. The bad outcome principle then encourages us to think about all the things that could possibly go wrong and how we'll overcome it. It's about tackling the problem head on. Like, imagine that we've got a presentation come up. Like, we can think of a million different ways in which that could go wrong. Like, imagine the technology fails, or we can't find our presentation, or the audience isn't engaged. Like, We can't leave anything out of consideration. And the truth is that most people aren't actually bad problem solvers, we're just really bad problem anticipators. If we can anticipate all the ways in which our weight loss journey is going to fail, or that our business plan isn't going to work, then we're going to massively increase our chances of success. The second levels thinking principle then gets us to ask ourselves, and then what? The idea is that with first levels thinking, we look to solve the immediate problem without much regard to the future issues that may cause later down the line. So for example, let's say we're eating a chocolate bar that may deal with the problem that we're hungry, but it might not take into account the downstream consequences of eating that chocolate bar, for example on our health and well-being. And so the second level thinking principle then gets us to look at the problem from start to finish. It looks at the immediate problem and then looks past that immediate problem, and it gets us to ask, and then what? And in those circumstances, eating that chocolate bar doesn't seem quite so enticing. Actually, all of this really reminds me of Susie Welch's 10-10-10 framework, which is also a good thing to apply here too. And the idea is that before we make any decision, we should ask ourselves 3 questions. In 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years from now, how are you going to feel about this decision? Honestly, it's really easy to feel good about a decision in 10 minutes from now, especially if instant gratification or conflict avoidance is involved. But by taking a longer term perspective, we get our future self involved, and that offers us a completely different perspective. The other thing this prevents is binary thinking. Like when we first make a decision, it's really easy for us to think it's this or that. Like, we get a new job or we don't get a new job. We launch a new product or we don't launch a new product. We get married or we don't get married. But things are very rarely this black and white. And the best decision makers know this. And whenever they engage in binary thinking, they know this is like a clear sign that they haven't fully understood the problem. Like they've reduced the dimensions of the problem before they fully understood them. So getting ourselves to think into the future helps us to see a problem from multiple angles. We can also avoid binary thinking by using the 3+ principle. Basically, we want to think of at least 3 possible solutions to any problem. Now, even if we don't use that third solution, it helps us to understand that problem much better. It also gives us an opportunity to align our decisions with our goals, offers more optionality for the future, and also increases our chances that we're going to be happy with that decision later down the road. Okay, so now we've got a list of potential solutions, each suggesting a course of action that might work. We need to evaluate those options and pick the one that's most likely to make our future easier. But to evaluate the options, we need to know the criteria, and each problem is going to have its own specific set of criteria, which should become apparent if we understand the problem properly. For example, if I were renovating my house, then the criteria here could be the experience of the builders, their availability, and how long it's going to take them to actually complete the project. Or if I were looking to change up my diet, then the criteria here could be the nutritional value of the diet, how easy it is to follow, and whether or not it fits into my current lifestyle and dietary preferences. Once we have our list of criteria, we then need to determine which of these things is most important. You see, not all criteria are the same. We may have a list of 100 variables, but they're not going to be equally important. And once we've determined what's the most important thing, making that decision becomes so much easier. For instance, take the diet example. The nutritional value of the food is completely pointless and irrelevant if we don't stick to that thing long term, because it doesn't fit into our current diet plan or our lifestyle, or it's just really, really hard to follow. Instead, we'll be far better off eating less nutritionally perfect food from time to time if it means that we can maintain a more consistent and sustainable eating habit. So create your criteria, choose which criteria are most important, and evaluate your options based on that thing. Finally, we need to take action. And honestly, this can be super difficult. And one of the main reasons for this is because making a decision can be scary. Like we may be scared of being wrong or scared of the consequences. And it's not so much that we don't know what to do as much as we don't want to deal with the reality of doing it. Like we don't want to have a hard conversation because we might hurt someone's feelings, or we don't want to fire the person that we like, even though we know that person isn't the right person for the job. But you know what? I found that we shouldn't actually be scared of making decisions in life because most decisions are type 2 decisions. Let me explain. Basically, not all decisions are created equally. A type 1 decision is irreversible and has a significant impact in your life, whereas a type 2 decision is reversible and has far less severe consequences. And what you'll find is that most decisions we make in life fall into the second category. We can reverse course, we can change our mind, and mitigate the impact with relative ease. The reality is that we're rarely trapped in the decisions we make. Like, if you don't like your current job, you can quit. If you don't like your new phone, you can return it. Or if you're unhappy in your relationship, you can leave. So if the cost to undo a decision is low, make it as soon as possible, and only delay a decision if the cost to undo it is high. Either way, it's actually really hard to be 100% sure of any decision we make, and that's totally cool. As long as we're at least 51% sure of the decision, then that's going to be enough. And 99% of the time, we're going to have made the right decision. And if not, it's probably not too late to change your mind.